Again, it is certainly a pleasure to be back in Nashville and to see all of you here. This topic is one that is important to me. There are those folks who are professional educators. There are those who are education advocates. My wife, who's an ordained minister, she also is certified primary and secondary education specialist, also was a Dean of Education and Vice President at Kennedy King College in Chicago as well, and she has her own education consulting group, and not only education when it comes to school, but also Christian education. So that's her thing. But for me, there's certainly been someone who has been an advocate when it comes to education, all of the platforms that I've always run, because I understand that there is, as someone who covers story each and every single day, and I just also update, I need to get folks a new bio. So we launched in November 2013 our new show, News One Now, which is the only daily morning show targeting African Americans in the country on TV One. And a couple of folks said, "Man, you missing the show on Sunday." I'm like, "No, we stopped that a year and a half ago. I'm on every day now." On the show, we certainly addressed these issues. And it was interesting. I had Senator Tim Scott, Republican senator from South Carolina, on the show, and we were talking. I forgot what we were talking about. And he, at one point, he tried to be a little flippant. He said, "You know what? We need to have a whole hour on education." I said, "All right, when you want to do it?" And he looked at me and he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you just said you want to have a whole hour discussion on education." I said, "It's my show. I don't have to ask anybody." When you want to do it? And he said, "Well," and I said, we were on live television. I said, "Don't throw it out there, because let's do it." So a couple of days later, his office called back and they said, "Well, in a couple of weeks, we think we have 30 minutes. I said, "Stop. He said an hour conversation. I didn't suggest it." So they found the hour and he came back, and I told him, I said, "See, don't throw something out at me on live television." I said, "Because I'll accept it." And we ended up having the whole show was on the issue of education. And it is important because I understand when we talk about income inequality, there's a direct link. When we talk about folks as adults, the ability to build and create wealth in education. When we talk about the Brandeis University study that says that the average white household in America has $100,000 in wealth, and the average black household has $5,000, all of that has a direct result when it comes to the issue of education. We can talk about police brutality. We can talk about the issue of being denied opportunity. We can talk about any number of things, but I do believe the two most fundamental issues that will impact African Americans today and in the future are the same two issues that we have been dealing with coming out of slavery, and that is educational opportunities and economic opportunities. Those two are absolutely linked. And so I don't look at, so for me, I don't look at this issue from the perspective of they are separate. I don't look at them from the perspective that somehow one does not impact the other. The fact of the matter is they both go together. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to phrase this, anytime you got this many black people and you in the South, you have to title what you speak about like you in church. Somebody will say, "What do you talk about?" So if you don't have a title, you're like, let me figure out how can I frame this. And so I'll put it this way: looking for a few radical education revolutionaries. Looking for a few radical education revolutionaries. One of my favorite movies is the movie A Few Good Men. We all remember that scene when Jack Nicholson was on the stand and he was being questioned by Tom Cruise, and when Jack Nicholson said, "You want the truth?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "No." He said, "I want the truth." "No, you can't handle the truth." Let me be clear at the outset, if you're looking for somebody to come provide comfort to you, you should have invited my wife. Because as a minister, that's what she does. She provides comfort. God has given me a spirit of providing discomfort. So, let you know now, might get a little rough. You might start doing what I call a butt dance. Y'all saw me when I was grilling somebody on television, and they start moving in their seat, like getting real uncomfortable. I call it the butt dance. Because when we are dealing with where we stand today, education, economics, we have to deal with some uncomfortable truths. We have to stop living in la-la land. We have to stop acting as if somehow everything is all well, is perfect and good, and if only our state governments could just send us a bigger check that can solve all problems. That's a flat-out lie. We also have to stop isolating this issue to somehow that if we only just get the top-notch teachers, that's going to just solve our problems. That's a lie. If we also say, well, if we can just somehow get administrators and to act right, then everything will be all fine, when that's simply not true as well. And we also need to stop lying to ourselves when we are letting parents off the hook when it comes to their responsibility for their kids. See, many of you, raise your hand if you are an elected school board member. Now you know, because y'all have to deal with this. And when I was at the Chicago Defender, all the politicians, they would come through and they would want our endorsement. And I was the executive editor, and really it was my endorsement because other folks didn't matter. And so I would ask every single politician who came in there, I said, my question to you is, how are you challenging your constituents to do their part when it comes to changing their communities? And I would bring up education. I said, let me ask you a question. So when you have your town hall meetings and if a parent stands up and is demanding what you're going to do to fix schools, to fix their kids' education, I said, do you in turn ask that parent, are they a member of a PTA, are they a member of an education group? And each one of them said, man, I don't know about that. That's asking a lot. I say, well, you can't stand there and allow somebody to tear you apart about what you are going to do with education if they are unwilling to invest in their own child. And I phrase it that way because everybody must have some skin in the game if we're talking about how we fix a system. I was speaking at an event for the Shot Foundation, and I was moderating this event, and I mentioned I don't like sorry teachers. This guy stood up and ran to the mic, and he said, there are no sorry teachers. I said, you got to be stuck on stupid. Now, mind you, sitting on a panel was Bernice Powell Jackson, was Randy Weingarten, was Reverend Jackson, and about 7, 8 other people, in which I didn't care. I said, because you can't show me a profession in America where there are not some people who sorry. I said, let me help you out. I don't want sorry journalists in my profession. I said, so you can't convince me that there's some people who are in the classroom who don't belong in the classroom. I said, but let me cover this a little further. I said, I don't like sorry teachers. I don't like sorry principals. I don't like sorry administrators. I don't like sorry school board members. I don't like sorry politicians over school boards. I said, I don't like sorry parents. So did we cover all the sorriness? And when I talk about the uncomfortable truth, you know as well as I know that there are some people sitting on the school board where you from who have no business making decisions when it comes to education. Now, I know that's rough for some folks because that might affect your membership. But when you are making the hardcore decisions, you need people who know what the hell they're talking about versus some folk who are there for ego and power. I told you I was going to get a little rough up in here. Because we cannot talk about dealing with the future lives of students. We can't talk about literally dealing with the future of America, because do understand, my brother from the Army was real nice. The state of education in America, as well as the issue of our folks being unable to meet the health requirements for the military, has created a national security problem. Leading generals have already reported that there's a national security problem. They said that it is a national security problem when we talk about the inability to get the top-notch folks in our armed services. So please tell me this: if our generals believe that there's a national security problem when it comes to the next generation, well, you should understand there's also a national security problem, an economic security problem, when they're going to be going out 18, 20, 25, 30, and will be unable to fulfill the jobs in the next generation. So then, what are we going to do? See, the reason I'm talking about requiring radical revolutionaries, because revolutionary thinking and revolutionary acting does not require nice, happy-go-lucky, can we all just get along people. And what I also understand when we talk about this country and we start using words like radical and revolutionary within the framework of black people, some folk get a little scared. See, we can laud the founding fathers calling them radical and revolutionaries, but all of a sudden when you start talking about folks who operate in the black freedom movement and Black Panthers and others, all of a sudden folks start getting a little scared. Because when we say radical and revolutionary, automatically in black folks, all of a sudden, oh my Lord, berets, leather jackets, and they want to take over the world. But we have to confront the reality that Pew showed that this year, for the first time in American history, 52% of all kids who are in public schools are black and brown. We ain't going back. It's not changing. The birth rates of whites is decreasing, is not keeping up pace with the birth rates of African Americans and Hispanics. America is changing. 30 years ago, we were told that America will be majority minority country, and folks said, oh man, that's so far away, I ain't worried about it. Now in 2015, we're sitting here realizing that right now you have nearly 10 states where the majority population, 15 and under, are minority students. Right now. And so we are looking at a changing America, and it is going to require us to have a much different view in terms of how we are going to approach this idea of education. When I was in Chicago on my radio show, I had a state representative on the show who was adamantly opposed to a virtual charter school. It was a part of Chicago public schools. And I'm talking to her, and I said, well, let me ask you a question. She wanted to shut it down. I said, have you had any conversation with any parents of kids in the virtual charter school? No. I said, we live on air too. I don't know why they keep acting fool when we live on air. I said, have you talked to any of the students who are in the virtual charter school? She said, no. I said, so you want to shut something down that you don't know a damn thing about? And she says, well, I believe in brick and mortar. I said, well, I don't understand. You haven't even bothered to ask the very people involved how it works, and you want to short circuit something because somebody else don't like it. I said, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I ripped her for the next hour. And then I ripped her the next day. Then I ripped her a new one the next day. And I ripped her so bad that she finally picked up the phone and called some folk and then realized that it wasn't a bad idea, and she stopped trying to shut it down. What we are dealing with folks who want to believe that they're living in a world that existed when they were kids, Well, that is not the world we're living in now. I mean, just to show you, do understand, while I am talking to you, right now I'm live streaming this speech to 600,000 folks who follow me on social media through Google Hangout on air. While I'm talking to you, I have this little camera that looks like a flashlight. It's 1080 HD. You couldn't do this 50 years ago. And so if we are sitting here right now with our smartphones and PDAs and Wi-Fi and all of a sudden talking about digital photography, we're taking pictures on our phones and transmitting around the world, well then why in the world are we still trying to operate and teaching kids from a model that frankly harkens back to the 1800s? Now again, I know some folks like, okay, man, where he going with this? I did say radical and revolutionary. Because when I view education in America, I don't view it in terms of just this way. Education in America for me is a pie. It's a pie. There's public, there's private, there's charter, there's magnet, there's voucher, there's homeschool. All of that encompasses education in America. And I understand a slice will be in public, a slice will be in private, a slice will be in magnets, a slice will be in charters, a slice will be in vouchers, a slice will be when it comes to home. My philosophy when it comes to education is real simple. I only want what works. And that's rough for some folks. I want what works and how do you educate, period, every period, child, period. And so I'm not just wedded to that. My wife and I have raised 6 of my nieces. The 6 nieces learn differently. We can't sit here and treat all 6 the exact same. They actually learn differently. And so we're sitting here watching these fights all across America, where there are folks who are saying, well, we really shouldn't have Eagle Academy in New York because it's a charter school when it's not a charter school, it's actually a traditional school, but they're teaching differently because it's an all-male school. So now we have folks saying, well, we shouldn't have all-male schools, we should have everybody learn together. Well, hell, if they learning in an all-male school, knock yourself out, do what you want to do. If they're learning in an all-female school, knock yourself out. If they're learning in a mixed school, great. If they're learning in a magnet school, cool. I'm good with all of it as long as it works. Yet we are fighting change because we're trying to hold on to a way of thinking versus saying, wait a minute, does it work? How many of you remember watching Cicely Tyson play Marva Collins in the CBS weekly movie? How is it that Marva Collins in the 70s and 80s in Chicago could take a kid at the beginning of the semester who could not read, and by the second semester have them reciting Shakespeare? I would think that if I was a superintendent, or if I was a school board member, or a school board chair, I would get on a plane and go to Georgia, where she's retired. Before she goes on to glory and say, I need you to tell me how you did it so we can possibly replicate your model. It worked. But for some reason, we have an aversion to want to challenge folks to think differently and to go beyond the traditional thinking in terms of education. See, I understand that you can have different education systems operating at the very same time in one district. That one size fits all simply does not work. It might work on a stretch hat, but it don't work when it comes to education. Now, y'all mostly don't buy one size fit all clothes. But for some reason in America, we believe in one size fits all education. I had someone tell me, they said, Roland, I can't believe you are an advocate of school choice. I said, really? I said, you ever heard of James Anderson? And the person told me, no, I ain't never heard of James Anderson. Well, so James Anderson is a professor at the University of Illinois who wrote a book called The Education of Blacks in the South from 1860 to 1935. And what James Anderson laid out is that black folks chose school choice out of slavery. I said, so you trying to tell me that school choice is something new when we chose it out of slavery? I said, do you understand that school choice was chosen by black folks during Jim Crow? School choice was chosen by black folks during the Black Freedom Movement. Who heard of freedom schools? That's school choice. When it was created to say that the school system is not adequately educating our kids, so we're going to create freedom schools in our churches, in our community centers, that will provide the level of education that they are not getting and filling the gap. That is school choice. But see, part of the problem is that we have narrowly defined what this is. And that's when we have gotten in trouble, because we don't want to expand our thinking and have radical thinking and have a different particular view. You really should get that James Anderson book, because it really speaks to where we stand now. Here we are talking about in Brown versus Board of Education, we wanted to all of a sudden say multiple kids working, educating in the same place, when the fact of the matter is, today our schools are more segregated now than ever. Because they're based upon a neighborhood model. Neighborhoods are based upon income. Income is typically based upon race. And so more than likely, the neighborhood is going to reflect the available jobs that folks are able to get. So you're going to have like-minded folks living in that particular neighborhood. Which is why I'm not one of these folks who gets all wrapped up in, well, we got to have that neighborhood school, because, see, I don't hold on to nothing that fails. If I got to get on the bus and go across town and get my education, well, hell, tell me what time the bus gets here so I can be there early. Because, see, I was watching a video the other day of some parents complaining about the all-charter school system in New Orleans, and they were saying, I got 5 kids, and they're going to 5 different schools. And I'm going, okay. I said, because tell me, when 5 of your kids were going to the same school, were they learning? See, understand, my parents had 5 kids. My brother went to Jones High School in Houston. I went to Yates High School in Houston. My sister went to High School for Health Professionals. My other 2 sisters went to one middle school, and one went to another high school. 5 different kids, 5 different schools. Oh, don't think that all of a sudden I grew up going to private school. My parents had money. No, my mom and dad never went to college. My parents never made more than $50,000 combined. So I understand what folks are talking about. See, I grew up in Clinton Park in Houston. I went to public schools my entire life. I went to Clinton Park Elementary School, Pleasantville Elementary School, William Howland Middle School, Yates High School, went to Texas A&M, all public schools. I rode a damn bus from 3rd grade to all the way through college. Trust me, I ain't tripping on buses. Because at some point, we have to be really honest with ourselves when it comes to what we are confronting, and that is, we want folks, they want convenience, but please tell me, how is it that as adults, we will travel 20, 30, 40, 50 miles for a job that will pay us, but somehow we're unwilling to say our kids should do the same? I understand we want our kids to go down the street, but the reality is, if they're going down the street in a pit of hell, then they don't need to be going down the street. And again, I understand we want the old model. There are people right now who are angry in Chicago saying the mayor shut down 50 schools. How he did it was ridiculous. How they communicated was ridiculous. But people don't want to confront the reality that Chicago has 150,000 fewer students today than it had a decade ago, and it doesn't make sense to continue to sit here and invest in buildings and not invest in students. And we get caught up in a building conversation and not a student conversation, and when we are investing dollars in buildings to prop them up and they're not being used to full capacity, that is called wasteful spending. And so we have to somehow confront and tell the public, stop being wedded to a building and be more wedded to whether or not your child is going to get educated. And that requires being truthful with them and saying, look, you can't have it your way. This ain't Burger King. And I understand that fight. When I ran the Chicago Defender, I had people who were protesting me in front of the building because they said, y'all can't leave this building. We moved into this building in 1955. We were literally using 10% of the building. It would have cost us $8 million to upgrade the building when the entire company wasn't worth $8 million. And we had historians who were saying, but the history of the building. I said, damn the history, take your pick. The building or the paper? Which one you want? I said, because I'm not here to save the building, I'm here to save the paper. The paper hadn't made a doggone profit in 20 years when I got there. Made a profit my last 2 years. I said, why? Because we moved out of the raggedy building. That's the kind of serious conversation we must have, and that is, we can't keep fighting for buildings and say, no, we got to fight for the people who are walking in the building. So what I'm asking for us is to be far more radical and revolutionary in our thinking and how we are challenging the public to understand really what is at stake here when we're talking about education. And that might mean saying some stuff that might put your election in jeopardy, but I would much prefer somebody being truthful and honest and going down with the fight as opposed to propping up what is fake. Oh, and I know it's tough. Because when we have these discussions today about education, not about kids, we're debating about contracts. We're debating about tenure. We're debating about union dues. We're debating about, well, who's going to get what. What should be at the top of mind in every conversation is this in the best interest of children? Every conversation. So it trips me out when I hear these people say, well, I can't believe you're on the board of Students First and you want to tear down public education. I said, no, what I understand is public education is a delivery system. The post office was a delivery system. FedEx is a delivery system. UPS is a delivery system. And so if there are newer delivery systems that are getting the mail to us in an efficient manner, maybe we must somehow say, well, wait a minute, we might need to re-engineer our delivery system to deliver what we're supposed to be delivering. Now again, somebody's sitting here probably thinking, yeah, but this is what we do. You're just an advocate. Yeah, you're right. But when I had to look at my 6 nieces and look at 2 of them falling behind, when I saw the gaps in education, when I had to look at my 2 twin nieces who we got when they were a year and a half, and how when they went back to Texas a year later, they went to their daycare center and the daycare teacher said, I don't know where these kids came from, but they know stuff other kids don't know at this age. And then when my nieces went to the public school in the 1st and 2nd and 3rd grade, they were angry and they had an attitude. Oh, not because they had discipline problems, because I will beat a kid's behind. Y'all don't believe in spanking, that's your problem. I ain't got no problem jacking a kid up. That's why right now, if her mama calls me and they say they tripping, I can put them on speakerphone and fix that problem in 5 minutes. But when my nieces were sitting in their traditional public classroom, they were angry. And the teacher didn't understand why they were angry. They were angry because they were there to learn and the other kids and their behavior was ticking them off. And they were saying, no, it's not that I'm mad at the teacher. I snapped at the teacher because the teacher wouldn't quiet the students down while I'm trying to learn. And so my wife and I chose to bring all of 6 of my nieces to Virginia, and they were in a virtual charter school. They were now in an environment where they were at home, and it was a quiet environment, and then their learning was accelerated. That's not for every kid. But the reality is, if the option is not there for them, then imagine if they had to sit in those same classrooms in the 3rd grade, in the 4th grade, in the 5th grade, in the 6th, in the 7th, in the 8th, in the 9th, the 10th, 11th, and 12th. What would they be like when they graduated from high school? What I'm talking about is being able to confront the fundamental problems that we face, and that is parents should have options. And if your option is to stay where you are, fine, but we should not limit their options, because guess what? Not a single person in here, your housing options are not limited. Your job options are not limited. If you all of a sudden got a better job offer from somebody else, you will pack your stuff up and move to a whole other state or go across the country, but somehow we tell parents, just stay right where you are and we'll fix this thing eventually. And that's really where we are right now. When you leave here, you should go back with a radical view, and that is, to any superintendent, I need to know what is working in this district and why are we not replicating what's working. That's not something that's hard to ask for. But it's demanding a level of accountability, which is the one word many of us do not like, and that is holding people accountable for where we are, because we are looking at a situation where kids are not going to be in position to take advantage of the American dream, when the next generation, the numbers show, will be worse off than their parents' generation, and that is an abomination. And so when we talk about accountability, it means forcing people to have to defend what they're doing and explain why we must continue to go down that path, and then have the courage to get rid of stuff that's not working, that's draining our budgets. But it also requires this here. This is where one of the things that you have to do, which means getting tough with elected officials, but also county officials and state officials. One of the real fundamental problems with our schools is that the reality is education is probably number 6 or 7 on the list. The fundamental issue with our schools, I believe, today is not just the question of whether they're learning, is that our schools today are not community service centers. You go into a school now, and now the issue is dental care, now the issue is health care, now the issue is whether or not the kids are eating at home, now the issue is psychotherapy when it comes to what's going on there, kids coming mad. You got teachers now who are not teachers, they're psychologists. They're having to worry about every other thing in the world except actually teaching the kids. Why? Because in our cities and counties, they shut down the community services centers where parents were able to go to get the services they needed, and so now they say, well, just dump them into the school. We have to get back to a point where school is actually, where education is number 1 at school. Well, that is the actual top priority. And so that means that you're going to have some uncomfortable conversations with folks by saying, look, the schoolhouse cannot be the be-all to end all to affect the lives of every single person. We need to return to focusing just on education. And that means that you're going to have to challenge some politicians in your area and challenge some county commissioners and some state officials and say, look, you need to pull some of this stuff out of the schools and reopen community service centers, so when parents say, I need dental care, you don't come to the school, you go there. I need health care, you don't come here, you go there. You come here to educate your kid, not to sit here and deal with every single part of your life, because the school cannot solve all of society's problems. It is only there for education. But that's why I say you must be radical and revolutionary, because you have to actually say it. Because we keep going along with the system and we're adding stuff on top of it and requiring more stuff, and you're sitting there scratching your head saying, look, we can't do all this sort of stuff, because somebody has to actually say it. We cannot do all of this. So the challenge that we all face is whether or not we want to be radical and revolutionary and enforcing people to confront hard truths. Because this is what I need you to understand. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of Selma. And here we were in Selma praising those freedom walkers. We would praise the folks who got the Civil Rights Act of '64 passed. That was last year. We praise those folks who were freedom riders. But I want you to think about the question I'm about to ask you. 25 or 50 years from now, what are they going to say about you when it came to education? See, when you start thinking that way, when you start thinking legacy, when you start thinking whether they're going to praise your name or curse your name, it causes you to look at this thing a whole lot different. So 25 or 50 years from now, ask yourself, what will they say about me? Will they say I was a go-along to get along school board member? Will they say I was a school board member who chose to be quiet and not demand accountability? Will they say I was a school board member who was unwilling to confront 21st century style education and was more about emphasizing 19th and 20th century style education? Or are they going to say, thank God he or she was there in that school board in 2015 and 2016 when they said we have to change how we're educating children? Your legacy, your name, your integrity, your credibility is on the line based upon your actions today. And that is hard for some people to accept because a lot of us think that, no, I'm doing good right now. But no, can we go even further? Can we go even harder? Can we challenge folks even more so? Because what we are talking about literally is the future of America. This is not just about where you are in your local community. Because the children where you are, if you are in Omaha, if you are in Harlingen, if you are in Houston, if you are in Evergreen Park, those kids are not going to only be living there. They're going to be moving to other parts of the country. And they're going to have children. And the kind of education those parents have today will determine how they treat their children tomorrow. And so if we don't change what's happening today, what we're looking at is we're going to have another generation of parents who are functionally illiterate, who are not driving their children, and their children tomorrow will be facing the exact same problems because they'll be confronting another school board who is willing to go along to get along. You have the ability to change the future of America based upon your actions today. The question is, what are you willing to do? Now, I'm going to close this way because I need you to visualize what happens when people determine they want to change something just by starting right now. So if I could have, let's see here, that table stand up. That's not rhetorical, that's literal. I need that table to stand up. I need that table to stand up. Yeah, y'all stand up, and y'all too. Now, don't look at me, look at them. Don't look at me, look at them. I need y'all to visualize that there are more people who are standing up right now than the number of people who were sitting in a church basement in Montgomery in 1955. There are more people standing up right now than the number of people who were sitting in a church basement in Montgomery in 1955. The people who are standing up represents the Montgomery Improvement Association. What we understand today as the Montgomery bus boycott as a 381-day boycott was actually planned to be a one-day boycott. It was never designed to go 2 days or 3 days or 381 days. It was designed to be a one-day boycott. The people in the MIA did not even ask for segregated busing to end. What they asked for was with better respect of black bus riders. But after 381 days, they broke the back of the Montgomery bus system there. They then said, well, what's next? And then began to turn their eyes to Birmingham, and then to Selma, and then to Albany, Georgia, and they began to other places all across the country. All of a sudden, a handful of people sitting in a church basement in Montgomery decided that they were going to launch a movement that literally would shake America to its core. And after Montgomery, they began to go on. In 1960, you begin to see 4 college students, inspired by the folks standing up, 4 college students from North Carolina A&T, who decided to, without permission, to integrate a lunch counter that spread like wildfire all across the South. And then they went on to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And then the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, Fair Housing Act of 68, Poor People's Campaign, what took place in Memphis. Because a handful of people sitting in a church basement in Montgomery decided we're going to have a one-day boycott to say we demand respect as black bus riders. If you go to Serbia today, you will see an MLK Drive. If you go to India today, you will see an MLK Drive. If you study the Lech Walesa and the Solidarity Movement, they were singing "We Shall Overcome" in Poland. In Eastern Russia, they were singing "We Shall Overcome." In the Arab Spring, they were wearing signs, "I am a man," the same signs worn by sanitation workers in Memphis. The point I'm making is, if a handful of people sitting in a church basement in Montgomery could change America, could change the world, and inspire movements, you tell me how 300 plus people sitting in this room by themselves cannot launch a movement to change education in America that can shake this country to its foundation. You have the power, you have the resources, you have the attitude, you have the people. It's time for you to get to work and say, America, we're going to change for the better. We're going to educate our children. We are going to make sure America is stronger. You can do it now. It's time for you to get to work.
Okay, cool. All right. I appreciate it.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
Mr. Martin.